It was a meeting that wasn't supposed to be seen. In the plush, discreet interior of a small neutral London cafe, one typically reserved for off-record conversations, the assistants sat quietly opposite each other. Meredith Maines and Liam Maguire, the media tacticians, representing Prince Harry, faced Tobin Andrea King Charles, communication secretary. No royal faces, no fanfare, just voices and careful wording. Yet behind the politeness lay a silent negotiation, the delicate dance between two worlds, trying desperately to keep their narratives from colliding publicly. This wasn't just about calendars, it was about credibility. Harry's team, ever mindful of optics, came armed with carefully curated agendas, calendars, and proposed schedules, all neatly designed ostensibly to avoid overlapping royal events, like Camilla's recent 78th birthday celebration. The sentiment was simple, at least on paper. We want peace, we want harmony, let's avoid stepping on each other's toes. But peace is rarely simple, especially not in the royal family. The context mattered. Just days earlier, headlines had blazed with news from Harry's Angola trip, images of him walking in Diana's footsteps, retracing iconic moments, making promises of meaningful change. The media loved it, the public applauded it. But at Buckingham Palace, it was seen differently. The images from Angola eclipsed a carefully planned narrative. Camilla's 78th birthday was supposed to dominate headlines, a testament to continuity and quiet duty, not overshadowed by echoes of Diana, not stolen by Harry's emotional return to Angola. For Buckingham Palace, Harry's trip wasn't a tribute. It was a threat. And now Harry's team sat professing innocence, offering olive branches wrapped in calendars, promising future courtesy. But was it genuine? Across from Meredith and Liam, Tobin Andrea smiled politely, nodding occasionally, scribbling notes that were less about logistics and more about intent. What did Harry really want? The palace had become adept at deciphering Harry's PR strategies. They'd weathered his tell-all memoir, navigated his interviews, and managed the aftershocks of his Netflix revelations. They knew his brand was as much built on controlled controversy as it was on carefully staged sincerity. And yet Harry's assistants pressed on, earnest in tone, earnest in posture. We genuinely believe sharing schedules can benefit everyone involved. It avoids confusion. It fosters mutual respect. Mutual respect, a phrase that sounds noble, neutral, benign, but in the lexicon of royal spin, nothing is neutral. Every word carries weight, every gesture holds purpose. Outside London buzzed obliviously, tourists snapping selfies, buses rumbling past historic landmarks. Inside the cafe, the conversation edged slowly towards its core. The palace wanted reassurance that Harry's outreach wasn't simply another tactical move, another calculated step to portray himself as the conciliatory figure, the peacemaker who tried his best only to be rejected by a rigid institution. Andrea's questions were subtle but pointed. Would Harry be prepared to consult directly with senior palace advisors regularly? A pause. Would the Sussexes consider aligning more closely with certain palace-supported charities? Another pause. The hesitation spoke volumes. Meredith and Liam exchanged glances. They'd prepared calendars, talking points, gestures of good faith. But tangible compromise. That was a different conversation entirely. It was clear Harry's idea of reconciliation, at least initially, was tightly controlled. Limited, strategic. Andrea took a careful sip of tea. His silence conveyed skepticism, not overtly hostile, but cautiously questioning. He understood well that every action by Harry was at its core about perception. It wasn't simply about preventing awkward date clashes. It was about optics, narratives, and legacy. Harry's team insisted that avoiding clashes with events like Camilla's birthday was purely respectful, but Andrea, and indeed, the palace, knew better. In the court of public opinion, Harry's sincerity had been under scrutiny for years, and now every conciliatory move he made was inevitably viewed through the lens of PR. Because in the royal world, the difference between genuine peace and a well-timed public relations maneuver was often impossible to distinguish. As the meeting drew to a close, handshakes were exchanged, smiles delivered, agreements reached at least on the surface. But when the palace door quietly closed behind Andrea later that day, the whispers began. Is Harry playing another game? Is this genuine? Can we trust it? The answers weren't clear, but the questions themselves carried the weight of doubt. In the days to follow, the headlines were optimistic. Harry's peace offering, a step toward royal harmony. Yet behind the optimism, skepticism lingered. And as insiders quietly leaked details of the meeting, the public began to wonder, is Harry truly looking for peace? Or is he simply positioning himself once again as a sympathetic figure, navigating a stubborn institution? In the royal game of chess, even an olive branch can become a pawn. The public waited, watched, speculated. But the palace, they'd seen this move before, and this time they were prepared. Because they knew better than anyone. Peace in the royal family always comes with terms. And PR, more often than not, is the invisible ink in every handshake. In royal circles, calendars aren't merely schedules. They're statements. On July 17th, Camilla, Queen Consort, marked her 78th birthday. a portrait unveiling subtle yet symbolically significant, intended to underscore her quiet service dedication and growing acceptance within the royal fold. But on that same day, miles away in Angola, Prince Harry stood amidst a completely different kind of symbolism. Cameras captured his walk across a minefield, literally retracing the iconic steps of his late mother, Princess Diana. It wasn't merely humanitarian, it was theatrical. Two events worlds apart collided in the public eye. For Buckingham Palace, Harry's timing was too precise to be accidental. The Angola trip wasn't spontaneous. It was meticulously planned dates, checked, vetted, and finalized. Harry knew exactly whose spotlight he'd share, whose thunder he'd risk stealing. Yet he proceeded anyway. The morning headlines were telling: Harry's emotional tribute to Diana in Angola, just like his mother. Princess Diana's legacy lives on through Prince Harry's mission. Camilla's quiet birthday portrait unveiling, intended as a respectful acknowledgement of her evolving role, slipped into sidebar news. Queen Camilla celebrates 78th birthday, palace shares new portrait. The photos were poised, respectful, elegant. Yet they stood no chance against Harry's dynamic images, against nostalgia, against Diana. For royal watchers, it felt familiar: Diana versus Camilla, sentiment versus stability, emotion versus establishment. And in this new era, Harry's era, nostalgia still won. Inside the palace, aides exchanged discreet, knowing glances. The quiet resignation was palpable. Harry's supposed gesture of goodwill, coordinating future schedules, came just after he had successfully captured headlines, gently overshadowing the carefully curated narrative around Camilla's birthday. Was this truly a scheduling oversight or something far more calculated? Buckingham Palace had worked hard for Camilla's image rehabilitation, decades in the making, carefully balanced between tradition and modernity. Her presence was meant to evoke comfort and continuity, yet Harry's Angola tribute conjured memories far stronger, far more visceral. Memories of Diana? In Angola, Harry embraced survivors, evoking his mother's legacy of warmth and compassion. Footage of him walking where she once walked dominated global broadcasts. He mentioned her, often tying himself irrevocably to her legacy. Camilla's portrait, in contrast, conveyed calm dignity, but dignity rarely makes headlines. The calendar clash wasn't just logistical, it was existential. Palace insiders whispered among themselves, did Harry choose this deliberately? Did he know? Of course he did. His team, meticulous and media-savvy, knew exactly the resonance this would have. The date wasn't random, neither was the location. Harry, in his own subtle way, reminded everyone that the echoes of Diana's footsteps would always overshadow mere portraits on palace walls. For Camilla, whose acceptance had always teetered precariously on public opinion, the overshadowing was quietly devastating. For Harry, however, it was another successful engagement in a series designed for maximum impact. As the sun set in Angola, Harry's team discreetly celebrated their media triumph. Meredith Maines and Liam Maguire, the architects of Harry's image, nodded approvingly at the day's headlines. Camilla's 78th birthday would be remembered, but not how Buckingham Palace had planned. It was a power play, subtle yet profound. No angry words were exchanged publicly. No accusations were voiced openly. Just quiet observations noted carefully by those who understood royal subtleties. Inside Kensington Palace, William watched the news coverage silently, familiar irritation settling in. Another instance of Harry leveraging Diana's legacy to maximum effect. Another calendar clash dressed as coincidence. The message was clear, even if unspoken. Harry's reconciliation gestures, such as offering to coordinate future schedules, seemed suddenly hollow, because actions always spoke louder than carefully worded proposals. If true reconciliation were Harry's goal, why overshadow Camilla's carefully planned moment? Was Harry genuinely unaware of the impact? Or was this, as many palace insiders quietly suspected, part of a larger long-term PR strategy? The palace knew Harry. They remembered his rebellions, his media strategies, his candid revelations. They knew he understood the power of perception intimately. A clash of calendars, therefore, was never just about timing. It was about dominance. It was about legacy, and it was about who controlled the narrative. As evening settled over London, palace aides discreetly recalibrated their calendars, wary of future conflicts. But privately, they wondered, had Harry's peace overtures been genuine, or had they once again been skillfully orchestrated for the optics? Camilla's portrait unveiling was intended as a dignified reaffirmation of her quiet strength. Instead, it served as a stark reminder. In the battle of emotion versus establishment sentiment versus stability, the memory of Diana, embodied through Harry, would always command attention. The palace knew this. Harry knew this. And now the world knew it too. Behind every public gesture, especially in royal circles, lies a hidden layer, a subtle web of intention carefully woven and rarely spoken. Prince Harry's proposal to coordinate official calendars with Buckingham and Kensington Palace seemed on the surface a straightforward conciliatory act. But to insiders familiar with the royal playbook, there was nothing straightforward about it. This wasn't simply about avoiding event conflicts or awkward overlaps, it was about control. Behind closed doors, royal aides dissected Harry's peaceful overture, decoding what lay beneath the polite language and neatly arranged schedules. Harry had spent years positioning himself as the outsider prince, the authentic, compassionate contrast to a rigid monarchy. His public persona was carefully crafted, emotional transparency, candid admissions, deliberate vulnerability. But these characteristics, which garnered sympathy and support, also proved potent weapons in public perception. Harry knew exactly how optics worked. The timing of his Angola trip wasn't accidental, it was strategic, demonstrating a nuanced understanding of narrative power. By coordinating future calendars, he wasn't just being courteous, he was setting himself up as the proactive peacemaker, the prince who once again reached out with an open hand, only to be potentially rebuffed by an institution known for rigidity. But why? Royal strategists quickly recognized this move as part of a broader agenda. Harry's team, Meredith Main's Liam Maguire, and others behind the scenes were acutely aware of his public image. They understood that for Harry to maintain influence, relevance, and public goodwill, he needed a balanced narrative. His frequent confrontations with the monarchy risked casting him as resentful or bitter, alienating moderate supporters who favored reconciliation over conflict. So Harry's team developed a subtle yet potent strategy. Public gestures of cooperation, quiet meetings proposing coordination, all designed to ensure Harry maintained the moral high ground. If the palace cooperated, Harry would be praised as the thoughtful diplomat, the prince who repaired bridges and healed rifts. If the palace resisted, Harry would appear the victim once again, the outsider prince striving for harmony, only to face rejection. Either way, Harry won. This wasn't mere theory, it was already unfolding. In the aftermath of the Angola-Camilla calendar clash, palace insiders murmured discreetly about the implications. They observed carefully, noting how the media narrative shifted subtly in Harry's favor. Commentators praised Harry's initiative. Harry takes the high road, offers palace unprecedented cooperation. But palace aides weren't fooled. They'd seen Harry's maneuvers before the candid interviews, the strategic memoir leaks, the emotional Netflix documentaries. Each move calculated for maximum emotional resonance, each designed to subtly critique the monarchy, while bolstering his own empathetic brand. Yet Harry's strategy wasn't flawless. Within palace walls, patience was thinning. Senior courtiers quietly voiced their frustrations. This is classic Harry, appear conciliatory while subtly undermining authority. He's making sure we're backed into a corner. The coordination offer, while seemingly benign, was strategic brilliance, forcing the palace to choose between collaboration or appearing obstinate. Buckingham Palace understood this clearly. Coordination wasn't merely practical, it was symbolic. Agreeing openly would legitimize Harry's independent royal agenda. Rejecting it outright would feed narratives of palace pettiness. Harry knew this, his team knew this. The hidden strategy was working exactly as intended. And for the royal institution, navigating this new PR minefield was delicate. Accepting Harry's overtures could appear weak, reactive. Rejecting them risked fueling sympathy for Harry's outsider narrative. There was no perfect response, only careful calculation. Inside Kensington Palace, William grappled silently with his brother's tactics. Once allies, now cautious rivals, bound by blood yet driven apart by public narratives. William saw Harry's latest gesture for what it truly was, a careful trap. Accept it, and Harry's brand strengthens, he becomes the peace broker. Reject it, and William alongside the palace risks seeming rigid, uncompromising, disconnected. The deeper truth, though unspoken publicly, was that Harry's actions weren't just about image, they were about survival, maintaining his relevance beyond palace walls. Independent yet royal, defiant yet conciliatory. For Harry, reconciliation wasn't simply emotional, it was existential. This hidden strategy extended beyond calendars and meetings. It reached into legacy building, narrative shaping, and public perception. Harry understood that reconciliation, authentic or otherwise, resonated deeply with the public psyche. People love stories of redemption, forgiveness, second chances. His team harnessed these sentiments skillfully. Yet the palace knew Harry's strategies well enough to question sincerity. Courtiers privately questioned, would Harry truly concede autonomy if coordination required compromises? Their doubt was understandable. Harry had spent years distancing himself from palace control. Sharing schedules implied shared agendas, something Harry had repeatedly rejected. And so beneath the careful smiles, handshakes, and polite negotiations, a deeper question lingered. Was Harry's offer a genuine peace move? Or was it another carefully engineered PR strategy to fortify his narrative as the misunderstood prince, the royal rebel, constantly extending olive branches, constantly rebuffed by tradition-bound walls? The hidden strategy, for those willing to see it, was clear. Harry wasn't just seeking harmony. He was seeking control of the royal narrative itself. And the palace? They had to decide carefully, because in the high-stakes game of royal perception, every response mattered. Every word carried weight, every silence spoke volumes. And as Harry's quiet strategy unfolded publicly, the palace privately prepared their countermoves, knowing the royal chessboard was far from stable and Harry's next move could redefine everything. In the quiet corridors of Buckingham Palace, reactions are rarely loud. Instead, they're measured, subtle, almost imperceptible. Yet behind every muted nod, carefully phrased statement, or studied silence lies a carefully calculated response. Prince Harry's recent gesture, his proposal to share calendars and schedules to avoid overlapping events, triggered just such a response. Publicly, the palace reacted with characteristic discretion. Buckingham Palace acknowledges the goodwill gesture proposed by the Duke of Sussex and looks forward to continued amicable discussions. Privately, the message was entirely different. Behind closed doors, senior palace advisors convened discreetly. They analyzed, debated, and meticulously dissected Harry's move. Was it sincere? Was it strategic? Was it a blend of both? No one doubted Harry's capacity for sincerity. What they questioned was his timing, intention, and ultimate goal. Palace aides recognized that his actions, although outwardly conciliatory, had implicitly cast them in a reactive role. Harry had positioned himself proactively as the peacemaker and the monarchy as potentially obstinate or aloof. The palace's response needed careful calibration. Too warm an embrace of Harry's proposal risked validating his independent royal activities, undermining the institution's authority. Conversely, outright dismissal or overt resistance would feed into narratives of a rigid, outdated monarchy, refusing to adapt or reconcile. Thus, the palace chose a path they understood best: diplomatic ambiguity. Their carefully constructed public statement implied openness, without commitment, cooperation without surrender. Internally, however, decisions were made with surgical precision. Staff received quiet instructions to carefully document every correspondence with Harry's team. Communications teams subtly emphasized existing royal events and their importance to Britain's cultural and historical narrative. Palace calendars, already meticulously managed, became even more strategic. The goal wasn't just to counteract Harry, it was to maintain the narrative advantage. In royal circles, perception is everything. Buckingham Palace, ever cognizant of this, began subtly reframing their public messaging. Camilla's engagements were softly highlighted through carefully timed press releases, quiet affirmations of her dedication emphasizing duty over celebrity. William's team, equally adept at royal diplomacy, also joined the subtle narrative shaping. The Prince of Wales appeared more frequently at community-focused events, emphasizing stability and continuity values the monarchy wished to underscore amid Harry's attempts at reconciliation. The underlying message: that the monarchy was steady, constant, unshaken by external dramas. But privately, frustration simmered. Courtiers lamented the challenge of counteracting Harry's effective PR strategy. One senior aide remarked candidly behind closed doors, "We're expected to respond calmly while Harry capitalizes on emotional appeal. Every step he makes publicly forces us into careful retreat or cautious advance. He's mastering the optics." The palace understood this PR battle wasn't about winning hearts outright. It was about preserving dignity, continuity, and authority. Harry's proposals, although outwardly harmless, implicitly suggested the monarchy was outdated or intransigent unless it agreed openly with his terms. Accepting openly would compromise their independence, rejecting outright would risk their reputation. Hence, the palace chose nuanced acknowledgement, quiet, controlled communications, careful, measured language, strategic silence where appropriate. These understated tactics sent a quiet yet clear message. The palace would engage on its own terms. No loud statements, no dramatic rebuffs, simply a calm, calculated response designed to signal strength through subtlety. Royal advisors also quietly initiated internal reviews, assessing scheduling protocols, event timing, and media coordination to ensure minimal vulnerability to future narrative disruptions. Harry's calendars were studied meticulously, his patterns analyzed, every public move anticipated. In many ways, Buckingham Palace's response was like a chess master's careful positioning. They knew Harry's capabilities, his media-savvy emotional resonance, and strategic timing. And while publicly open to coordination privately, the palace prepared defenses. Every event became carefully considered. Communications teams planned counter-narratives. Senior aides monitored public sentiment, closely ready to adapt messaging at a moment's notice. This was more than management, it was precision. The message to Harry, delivered silently yet decisively, was clear. Buckingham Palace would not be coerced by subtle PR maneuvers. They would not compromise their autonomy to satisfy external optics. Yet this careful, calculated stance was not without risk. Public perception is notoriously unpredictable. The monarchy's subtle reactions could easily be misinterpreted as coldness, inflexibility, or aloofness. Harry's emotional openness held mass appeal, especially to those sympathetic to his grievances with the institution. By comparison, the palace's calculated diplomatic responses might appear distant or indifferent. But for Buckingham Palace, this risk was preferable to losing control of their narrative entirely. They recognized Harry's strategy clearly, publicly conciliatory moves backed by emotional narratives designed to position him as the sympathetic, misunderstood prince. The palace's response, therefore, was strategic neutrality, acknowledgement without commitment, engagement without surrender, diplomacy without vulnerability. Privately, advisors knew this careful balancing act would define royal dynamics for the foreseeable future. Yet beneath their controlled reactions lay a deeper truth. Harry's tactics, however subtle, had undeniably shifted palace strategy. He forced an institution rooted in tradition and hierarchy into continuous defensive positioning. And that perhaps was Harry's ultimate intent, not to openly confront or humiliate, but to quietly assert his presence, his influence, and his relevance. Buckingham Palace recognized this fully. Their response, carefully calculated and subtly executed, was their attempt to reclaim control of their narrative, their image, their future. Because in the royal world, every reaction, every word, and every silence is more than just communication. It is strategy. At the crossroads of public perception and private reality stood Prince Harry's latest move, a carefully extended hand of peace. But beneath the surface, beyond the meticulously prepared calendars, the quiet cafe meetings, and the diplomatic nods lay a deeper question that lingered heavily in the air. Was this genuine reconciliation or merely another calculated PR stunt? Public opinion divided sharply. Harry's supporters viewed his proposal as heartfelt, sincere, a genuine attempt at healing familial wounds driven by his well-known advocacy for emotional authenticity and openness. Yet skeptics saw something entirely different. A carefully orchestrated maneuver, an emotional chess move designed to corner Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace into an impossible choice. For Harry, this ambiguity had become his greatest advantage. His public gestures of cooperation were undeniably appealing, especially to a modern audience craving authenticity from their public figures. His openness about mental health, grief, and reconciliation resonated deeply, with a public increasingly wary of traditional royal stoicism. Yet those who understood royal PR recognized Harry's tactics clearly: extend a public olive branch, force the monarchy into a response, gain moral high ground regardless of outcome. Buckingham Palace understood this perfectly, yet responding was complex. Any outright rejection of Harry's proposal risked fueling accusations of institutional rigidity, coldness, and emotional detachment. Acceptance risked legitimizing his independent actions and compromising royal authority. Harry, meanwhile, benefited either way. If the palace cooperated, his image as a peacemaker flourished. If they resisted, his narrative as the sympathetic outsider grew stronger. In either scenario, Harry controlled the narrative. And this control raised difficult questions. Was Harry genuinely seeking reconciliation, or was reconciliation simply his latest tool in shaping his public persona? Inside royal corridors, aides quietly debated. Some argued Harry's actions demonstrated genuine intent, a sincere desire to heal fractured family relationships. Others countered that his history suggested strategic calculation behind every emotional revelation. William, ever cautious, privately grappled with these complexities. Once close brothers, he and Harry now navigated fraught territory, each wary of the other's intentions, each aware of the fragile public nature of their interactions. Yet beneath their complicated dynamics lay a deeper truth. Public perception, often driven more by emotion than logic, favored Harry's narrative. His openness about personal struggles, his advocacy for emotional health, and his carefully timed gestures of reconciliation were powerful. But were they authentic? Palace insiders privately questioned Harry's sincerity, skeptical of the timing, the presentation, and the careful media orchestration surrounding his supposed peace offerings. In their view, Harry had consistently demonstrated a keen understanding of optics, leveraging emotional openness for maximum public sympathy, strategic revelations for narrative dominance. Yet to the wider public, these tactics remained largely invisible. To many, Harry appeared genuinely conciliatory, bravely extending his hand toward an institution notoriously rigid and resistant to change. The palace therefore walked a tightrope, acknowledging Harry without validating him, engaging without conceding ground, responding without losing control of their narrative. It was a delicate, exhausting balancing act. But the fundamental question remained: was Harry's peace overture real or merely strategic PR? Palace analysts studied every move, searching for answers. Harry's calendars, his media team's careful statements, his subtle public positioning all suggested careful planning rather than spontaneous sincerity. Yet genuine reconciliation could never fully be dismissed as a possibility. Harry's personal pain, familial divisions, and past emotional revelations had always contained elements of genuine vulnerability and openness. Perhaps palace insiders conceded privately the truth was somewhere in between. Genuine intention layered beneath careful PR strategy. Yet this ambiguous blend of authenticity and strategy placed the monarchy in a challenging position. Reject Harry's overtures and risk seeming cold. Accept them openly and risk empowering his independent actions. Harry, meanwhile, remained firmly in the driver's seat, publicly conciliatory, emotionally appealing, and strategically unassailable. This left Buckingham Palace with a stark reality. The era of quiet, unchallenged royal authority had passed. Harry had introduced a new style, emotional, strategic, unpredictable. And while Harry's true intentions remained unclear, his impact was undeniable. Whether real peace or PR stunt, Harry had successfully altered the royal narrative, making emotional authenticity, vulnerability, and openness central to public discourse about the monarchy. The palace, historically masters of controlled silence and calculated neutrality, now faced a new reality. Emotional authenticity, openness, and reconciliation had become powerful currencies Harry wielded expertly. Their response would define their future. Would they embrace change openly, risking traditional stability? Or would they maintain cautious neutrality, risking public perception as rigid or cold? Ultimately, Harry's true intention, peace or PR, remained known only to him. But the impact was clear. He had reshaped royal discourse, forced recalibrations within palace walls, and permanently altered public expectations of monarchy. Was it genuine reconciliation or strategic maneuvering? The answer might never be fully clear. But the consequences were unmistakable. Harry's moves had rewritten the royal playbook. And the palace knew that whether genuine or strategic, Harry's latest action had undeniably shifted the royal landscape. In this new era, authenticity and PR became indistinguishable. And perhaps for Prince Harry, that ambiguity was the ultimate victory.